Hello, folks. I am Nick Tonioni from Studio MPL at the Nashville Public Library, coming to you live from our podcasting studio. With me today is our guest, Seth, one of the mentors here at Studio MPL, who, among other things, teaches podcasting. Today, what we wanted to do is meet live here and just kind of talk to you about what podcasting is, how you can do it, and why you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Seth, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
My pleasure. Now, folks, if you don't know what a podcast is, first of all, and you'll excuse me if I have my notes up here, I thought Seth might start us off by describing a podcast.
Yeah, well, so I was actually looking the other day, just trying to figure out where the word podcast even came from, and I found out that in the early 2000s, a journalist for, I think, The Guardian combined basically broadcast and iPod as a way of kind of describing a podcast. But a lot of people also say a podcast is kind of like an internet talk show or internet radio that's able to be produced kind of easily from your home or from a studio. But it's open to all levels and hobbyists and professionals and everybody.
Sure, and it reminds me of like a lot of YouTube shows where you're watching a personality talk about something they know or that they're passionate about. But the good news is you can just like pop it on your phone and put it on your headset and listen to it while you're on the bus or mowing the lawn or sweeping the kitchen or whatever else you might be doing.
And podcasts can kind of fill all kinds of like needs or services in people's lives. And, you know, a lot of people listen to them for news, for politics, for finance, for all things like that. But also there's like comedy podcasts, there's hobby podcasts. There's something and somebody out there talking about it for just about any kind of subject you'd want.
Absolutely. I listen to a pretty wide variety myself, Seth. What are some of your favorite podcasts?
Well, some of the big ones are like the New York Times has some that are really great for getting your news and everything. NPR has a lot of great ones like Planet Money for finance
Love
and stuff
Planet
like
Money.
that. But also, I mean, just about any internet personality you like has their own podcast.
Absolutely. You know, I listened to this one. It's all about conspiracies and ghosts and mysteries and that sort of thing. And I got to really like the people that were on it. And sure enough, they've got about three other podcasts that they're part of. So I can kind of listen to all those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one that I listen to and a lot of my friends like a lot is also called Reply All, which is kind of just like weird stories about kind of like internet folklore a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I know that one well. And that's part of another big company, I believe. Is it Gimlet Media that does Reply All?
I believe so, yeah.
So it's almost like a production company, and they have a bunch of different podcasts, sort of in a way like your school. You know, you all might come together to make a bunch of podcasts about one particular topic or in one particular style.
Mm-hmm.
Seth, what are some common elements of a podcast in terms of how it's built, how long it lasts, that kind of thing?
Gotcha. Well, so for like professional podcasters and people that have ads that support them, that's usually how people make money off podcasts. But for those kind that are very popular and popular enough to get ads, a lot of them are between like 30 and 40 minutes. They have an intro, outro, you know, title music, and a lot of them also use kind of audio in the background as part of like a story.
Oh, like sound effects?
Mm-hmm. Sound effects, you know, field recordings, found sound, things like that. So if it's like a narrative podcast or a news story podcast, they'll sometimes use sounds to describe kind of the place that you're in and put the listener in that place.
Interesting. Now, Seth, you've done some podcasting workshops both virtually, which are available on our YouTube channel, but also in person. What are some general tips for developing a good podcast?
Well, one of them is that you have to just record a podcast and listen to how you sound and realize sometimes a lot of people vocalize and say say like, things like that. But probably the biggest thing is figuring out who you're making a podcast for.
So know your target audience.
Mm-hmm. And so part of that is kind of knowing your tone. Earlier we mentioned there's all different kinds. There's informative podcasts, conversational ones, fictional ones, narrative ones. So figuring out how you want to talk to your listener and why they're listening to you, I think is a big part of kind of giving your podcast a core identity.
Interesting. And it makes me think of one of the podcasts I was just talking to about that I listen to. And it's like a group of folks and they're kind of joking around and they're talking a little bit about their personal lives together before they even get into the topic. So in a way, when I'm listening to it, I feel like I'm right there with kind of like a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we would be calling, and I got my notes here, more of a conversational one?
Yeah. And part of it is like, kind of forming a relationship with the listener a little bit and kind of developing a sense of, I mean, a lot of podcasts that I've like listened to over the years, sometimes I'll have like inside jokes or just things like that would kind of let the listener feel like they're in on.
Oh, interesting.
And on that kind of thing, if it's a more conversational one.
So it kind of keeps you coming back every week because you feel like you're meeting your friends up.
Definitely. And another big thing is just like kind of developing, like I said, that the core identity, but also kind of a brand for it. So a lot of them have, original artwork, original music, all that kind of stuff. And
definitely.
I mean, if you're just like for like a hobbyist, sure, you can use kind of copywritten material because there's a good chance no one's going to really find your podcast.
And this might be the same for like a class, right? If you're making it for your teacher, for your classmates, you can use more copyrighted material.
Especially if it's for an educational setting. But once you start making money off of it or start putting it on bigger platforms like maybe YouTube or Spotify, a lot of record companies, if you're using music and stuff like that, have those algorithms that'll go through and scan for their copywritten material.
Oh, so you're saying if I were to make a podcast and I wanted to have like a song in the introduction, but I was going to try to put it on Spotify or YouTube, I should either use original music or use copyright-free music?
Yep, definitely.
Oh, awesome. And I think I've got something in my notes to talk a little bit about copyright-free music, just at a touch now. One other thing I wanted to mention, Seth, and I hope you agree with me on this, but when you're doing a podcast, I feel like it's always good to have almost like a script in a way. So you'll notice here, I've got my computer open and I've kind of got our outline of our conversation. That way, though we can talk and we can have fun and we can have a casual conversation, we also kind of know where we're going with it.
Yeah, definitely. And part of that, you can always have kind of those notes and stuff like that as a way of, having a consistent topic to talk about, kind of keeping the conversation flowing. But this is where editing becomes kind of a big part, because if you and I were to hit kind of a dead spot and be like, well, where should we take this next? You can always cut that out in the editing process.
Oh, I see. And then kind of seam two conversations together so it sounds a little smoother.
Definitely.
Excellent. And we might talk about editing a little bit more too, but because you may have noticed earlier that one of the alerts went off on my phone, and not really the best practice to have your phone out and not silenced while you're recording a podcast, but that's something that we might edit out in post-production.
Yeah, you could edit it out, but also using your phone to podcast is one way that people do it. We have all these fancy pieces of equipment here and everything.
And that's a great chance, and pardon me for interrupting guests, and always make sure you don't interrupt your interviewee. But maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about the technology that's involved. So
yeah, definitely.
Why don't we start big, like start with this kind of cool gear that we have, and then work our way down to like a phone or a computer.
Yeah, so what we've got is we have these microphones on mic stands, so we're not holding them. We're not going to be having any like hand motion sound getting in the mic.
Because if I may, and I've done this once or twice, but listen to this. Yeah, a little jarring when that comes in the middle of the conversation, so try not to touch it.
So we've got all these microphones, and they're hooked up to a Zoom recorder. I'm going to try to show this to the camera. And so that Zoom recorder is recording our audio. We're going to sync this up to the video for y'all to be able to watch it and hear this quality. But then that's also going to this headphone amplifier so that we're able to listen to the podcast as it's recording.
And headphones are really important when you're recording a podcast, especially when it's an interview style like this. And why is that?
Well, especially these days, if you're recording with multiple people, most of the time it's going to be virtual. You're not going to be meeting in person. So using headphones is a great way to record because it keeps audio of like your interviewee talking to you over your computer or however you're using it to talk to them. It keeps it from getting into your recording, and it just makes it easier to edit and cleaner to listen to.
Right on. And it really is, it's easy and clear to hear with my headphones on right now, and I can adjust with this headphone amplifier to see how loud I'm hearing things.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a pro setup in a way, right?
Definitely, yeah. This is probably out of a lot of people's price range. But this is how, like, if you listen to a professional podcast that's like ad supported and stuff like that, they usually pay for this kind of equipment just to make it easier for people to listen to and smoother.
Yeah, as you can see, pretty smooth and pretty easy to do. Multiple tracks here that we can break up and really easy to edit.
Yeah.
Now, however, if we don't have this kind of equipment, we can also use something that a lot of people just have is the cell phone, right?
Yeah. And cell phones, you can plug in headphones into them. A lot of headphones have inline microphones. But also you can just record using speakerphone on your phone.
Sure. And in this case, I have an app. This is an Android phone. And I have an app which I've lost.
Oh.
Here it is, called Smart Recorder. And I just
Nice.
open it up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute this microphone for a second. Testing, 1, 2, 3. This is my podcast on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Turn the microphone back on, and as you'll see, I'll just press the record button or the play. Testing, 1, 2, 3. This is my podcast on my phone. So a pretty easy way, if I don't have this kind of setup, to just record just using my phone here.
Yeah, and I use an iPhone, and on the iPhone, there's a voice memo app that comes built into it that allows you to do this exact same thing. And so from there, you can email it to yourself on the computer. There's also audio editing apps on cell phones.
Absolutely. So I can take this, for example, I just went back and recording 3 here, and I can just take it. Testing. And you can download it, you can share it, you can delete it, you can rename it. I can download it to my email or whatever, and then have an MP3 file, which is like an audio file that I can either edit, or if it's a short podcast and I'm happy with the way it turned out, I can just directly send that to my teacher, to my friends or anything, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great solution if you're either in a bind or you don't have this kind of equipment where you can record on your cell phone. And you can also record on a computer, right?
Yeah. A lot of computers have microphones built right in and webcams, so that makes it easier to voice chat with people and record that, and then you can just have a kind of a distant podcast just recorded over the internet.
Oh, like for example, if I was interviewing somebody from, even another country, I could do it in something like Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or one of the other conference call software, right?
Yeah. And so there are those ones that record simultaneously just in the app and everything, but also you could just do a video call and use a recording app on your laptop.
Oh, to just take that audio file out and turn it into a podcast.
Or just record your own audio as you're, voice chatting with somebody. The only complication is you need them to do that same thing as you do it.
Oh, I see, to make 2 separate files.
Instead of it recording all in one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I could presumably just like Zoom you and record that conversation, right? And export that as an MP3.
Yeah, and with Zoom, I believe that it creates an audio file for each of the individual participants.
I believe you're right.
Yeah.
So that way you can kind of make a podcast just like that, just from your computer if you have access to it.
Yeah.
If you don't have access to a phone or to a setup like we have here at Studio MPL.
Yeah, and whenever you record using a phone, I mean, obviously, the equipment we have sounds nice and everything, but there's ways to make your phone audio sound nice as well. Like you can record using just even your closet where there's a bunch of clothes hanging up. That helps to dampen sound a lot.
Oh, like taking the phone in the closet and recording it in there.
Yeah, or you could put your pillow or something like that behind where you're recording and just kind of have that absorb any sound that may bounce off the wall back at you or something like that.
That's a good tip. I've done that before on recordings on my computer, is put a pillow behind it so my voice doesn't bounce off the wall.
Yeah. So those are just a couple ways to make the recording cleaner, but also using software to edit it on a computer like GarageBand or Audacity. Dang, we just had the light go off on top.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah. I'm going to go.
Well, fortunately, since this is an audio program, it won't matter that the lights are off, but go ahead and flick those back on for us, Seth, and I'll talk a little bit more about setup. So a few other things you can do when we're recording a podcast to make it sound a little more professional is to not eat or drink during the podcast, so you don't hear your not have like a fan running in your room, or if you have the air conditioner on, you can turn that off. A lot of people say don't do it near a refrigerator because, believe it or not, refrigerators put off sort of this like whine that maybe we can't hear, but that might get picked up on a microphone. And what's great about these tips is if you're interested in podcasting, this is great. But also if you're interested in, say, like music and you're trying to record yourself singing or something like that, then you can follow these same kind of tips to get a better recording.
Mm-hmm. Or if you're into making videos or filmmaking or anything like that, these are also great tips for recording your sound for those.
Absolutely. So you're not getting a bunch of background noise. Now, earlier I mentioned that my alert on my phone went off and I didn't silence my phone. That's a good one, too, because you always want to silence your phone before you do something like this so you don't get that. But what happens if, say, Seth, I'm interviewing somebody, I can't go back and record it, and my phone did go off in the middle of it? How would I take out the sound of that phone? You talked a little bit about editing earlier.
Yeah, so with editing programs, like there are a couple free ones. If you're using PC or Mac, there's Audacity. If you're on Mac, there's also GarageBand is another one.
I've used GarageBand, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And with those, you can go in and clip out individual sound moments, or there's also a tool called noise cancellation, which that's one way of eliminating room sound.
Tell me more about room sound.
So that's like what you were talking about with the refrigerator or the air conditioning, just sounds that are going on in the room that create kind of a tone that'll just pick up and make different kinds of like hums and things like that throughout your whole recording.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In fact, I've even heard when you're talking about that sometimes it's good when you're about to record either a podcast or a song is to press record and just kind of let the microphone go for about 10 seconds or so, right? So you get to recognize those sounds.
Yeah, so that is able to give the program, like Audacity, whenever you use the noise removal tool, it'll ask you to get a sample of just that room sound or whatever sound you want to record. So that gives you a really clean and kind of thorough sample of whatever tone you want to record, or not record, but remove.
Oh, interesting. So taking, and I think they call it room tone in the industry, is a good way to make your podcast just that much more professional sounding.
Mm-hmm. But you can also clip out individual moments. So whether that is somebody saying or like, or just general silence when you're trying to kind of regroup and figure out where you want to talk about next or what direction you want to go next.
Oh, like perhaps I'm not following my notes very well or something comes up and we get off track on the conversation, which happens sometimes in podcasts, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's part of the charm of a podcast is that you might get to hear these folks have like a personal conversation, but if like I lose my train of thought, then we can go back and cut that out. Right?
Yeah, so you can do that, but also to answer your question about noise, like notifications on your phone, you can just clip out individual sections just like that, or mouth sounds, or whatever you may want to clip out.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is that, fortunately, the nice thing about recording a podcast is it doesn't have to be 100% perfect with every take, because you can A, edit it, or B, some of that thing, like the conversation piece, maybe almost becomes part of the character of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason if, you're delivering information to somebody, there's a reason they're not reading about it on Wikipedia themselves, and maybe they're listening to people talk about it.
Sure. It's a little bit more interesting sometimes to hear somebody else talk about it, or perhaps they can get like a personal point of view of somebody that they might not have access to otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
So say we've recorded our podcast, we're happy with the conversation, we're coming up towards the end of our time. I've been watching the timer on mine, and we're about 15 minutes now, and I want to have some music in the beginning or some music at the end. What are good ways to get some like free music?
Well, the best way to look for free music is to go online and either look for royalty-free music or music that's in the Creative Commons.
Creative Commons? And what exactly does the Creative Commons mean?
Creative Commons is a license that artists apply to their music and they release it under. That just means that basically anybody can use it. And there's different types of Creative Commons licenses. A lot of them require attribution. Some of them allow people to remix the music and alter it. Some of it, you can't transform the music at all. You just have to use it as is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but a lot of it just requires attribution to the original artist, but they don't charge any money for it.
Gotcha. So if I'm recording a podcast and publishing it, I might put in the credits, for example, this song was written by the band Purple Planet, and I got it free from, filmstro.com/music, which is a free music site. I could just kind of put Purple Planet in the credits and they would let me use that music.
Yeah, and I would always, whenever you find any music that you like on one of those websites, always check the page where the music's listed, because if it's under the Creative Commons, it'll have the exact license that it's under with all the restrictions and rules you have to follow to use the music.
That's great. And you want to respect other people's music. You want to respect the work that they put into it. Just like if you were to create a song and put it out there for people to enjoy, you'd want them to respect and credit you if they were to use that music.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're using somebody's music or something like that in the podcast that you're making. And just the same way that you'd expect somebody to respect whatever you make, you should do the same for the people who are participating to help you make yours.
Absolutely. We're all part of a Creative Commons, after all.
That's true.
Now, Seth, we've done our interview. We've learned a little bit about podcasting. We've talked about how to clean it up, how to edit it, the different types of podcasts. How do we get this podcast out so people can listen to it?
So there are a couple ways to do it. What we're talking about is hosting, essentially. So whenever you go and look up a podcast, whether it's on like the iTunes store or it's on Spotify or all these different places where you can find podcasts and listen to them. They're hosted somewhere. The file is. So all the stores where you go and you find your podcast, they're always looking at the place where the person is hosting the file online. And there are a couple different ways to do it that handle file hosting. One of them is SoundCloud.
Oh, SoundCloud? Like SoundCloud.com? I've heard of that.
Well, yeah, so that's mainly known for like music sharing. There
Sure.
are a couple like viral songs and people who have made like music careers using it. But I believe for a free account, you're limited to 2 or 3 hours of audio uploads. So
okay.
For music, that's a great amount of time. That's like over 3 albums of music.
Sure.
But for podcasts, that can, be an hour at a time sometimes.
Sure.
It's not that much. So they have paid subscriptions that you can do to get unlimited amounts of audio uploads and stuff. There's other websites like Blueberry and some other ones, but also a free tool for not only recording on the phone, editing on the phone, and publishing is called Anchor. And that is, I think, made through Spotify.
Oh, yeah, Anchor. Is it like an app that you can get for your phone?
Yeah. It's an app you can get on your phone, and I believe there's a desktop version as well.
Okay.
I don't know an incredible amount about using it, but I opened it the other day and just made kind of a fake podcast just to see how it would work. And you're able to record with friends on there. You're able to have fans submit audio recordings, and you're able to integrate those into your show. You can edit within the software, and they even create, titles and all kinds of, or not titles, but cover art.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So that if somebody were to see your podcast, they could see it kind of a picture and see something attractive that they'd want to click on and listen to the podcast.
Yeah, so they do that. They also allow you to do artwork for individual episodes and things like that.
Oh,
so
interesting.
It's kind of an all-inclusive tool for just podcasting straight from your phone.
Anchor, right?
Yeah.
Like a boat anchor, Anchor.
Yeah, it's the full spelling. There's no vowels dropped out or anything like that,
Okay.
like some websites like to do now.
Sure. Yeah. Check it out. And I remember when I used to do some podcasting, I would record it first, take the MP3 and upload it to SoundCloud, which we talked about, to basically create that hosted file on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to use something like Google Podcasts or Apple iTunes to basically publish that, because it would take that file and it would publish it on their platform.
Yep, and if you use some of those other techniques that aren't like Anchor, where it's really streamlined, you do have to, first of all, host it, and then you have to apply to all these publishing places, like iTunes.
Sure.
You have to kind of apply to their podcast platform. On Spotify, you have to apply to their podcast platform.
Gotcha. So there's a couple different steps. It's not hard. It is not expensive. I know the one I was doing, it was all free, but it just took a little time, if I recall.
It takes time if you're not using some of those more streamlined tools like Anchor.
Gotcha. Now, here's something interesting. If I were just to do a podcast that was only for, say, my teacher or for my classmates or for my family, I wouldn't even really need to go through those steps, right? I could just take that MP3 file and just like email it to them, right? Or share it with them.
Yeah. You can share directly with people, but with hosting and using something called an RSS feed that people subscribe to, it just makes your file available to everybody, and people that may not have that personal relationship with you where they just ask you, share your podcast with me.
Gotcha. So there's a couple different options. If you're just kind of experimenting and you want to share a podcast with your friend or your group of friends, you might just be able to email it. But if you wanted to get it out there in the world so that people can listen to it while they're driving or walking around or mowing their lawn like me and Seth, you would want to do an RSS feed and then use one of these other programs to publish your podcast.
Yep. And an RSS feed, I guess I didn't explain what that was, but once you host your podcast, the hosting platform creates this thing called an RSS feed, which is a bit old school compared to the way people are able to subscribe to content now on like YouTube or social media and stuff like that. But an RSS feed is essentially just a feed of content that your podcast catcher or manager, wherever you listen to them, just looks to make sure that they're up to date on all the latest releases from that specific distribution source.
Gotcha. So it's kind of getting into the little bit of the tech and the weeds, but RSS, like the letters, RSS, right?
Yes.
RSS feed is certainly something to look into if you're interested in podcasting.
And the last thing to do is marketing your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because hosting it and making it available is great and everything, but part of the problem with a podcast that is really open in terms of the tools to be able to make it is that anybody can make one. And a lot of people do make them.
So there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah. So what you got to do, not only branding it, but also marketing it. You need to, if you want other people to listen to it, you need to let people know it exists.
That's an excellent. So make a picture, tell your friends, make a something that you can post on Instagram. I know you can link to podcasts on Instagram.
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
kind of stuff.
Instagram, Twitter, all those
Sure.
social media tools like that. I know, as I said earlier, a lot of internet personalities also have podcasts.
Sure.
So if you have followings on different social media, that's a great way to let people who already like you know where they can get more of your content.
Oh yeah, like if they follow you on Twitter, Seth, they might like to listen to the Seth podcast, the
Yeah.
Seth Studio Hour every Saturday.
Where we just get down and chop it up about everything we do in the studio.
That's right, and we really get deep down into
Yeah.
the minds of Mr. Nick here at Studio MPL and our mentor Seth here at Studio MPL. Now, folks, if you'd like to learn more about podcasting, we'd love to have you at the Studio MPL space at Nashville Public Library. We're in a lot of different locations. We're at Maine, we're at Southeast, we're at Green Hills, we're at Bellevue, Bordeaux, East Branch, Madison. These are all libraries in your Nashville community that you'll find Studio MPL programming. We've got great stuff like microphones, computers, cameras, lights, green screen stuff, video games, virtual reality, music. We got a lot more than podcasting, but we're here for you.
Yeah, and at the main branch, what hours are people able to come?
2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So we're open for you right after school. You hop on your bus or whatever, and you come right on down here, and we can help you with your podcast. Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today, Mr. Seth.
Yeah. Thanks for
I
having
hope
me.
you've enjoyed being part of this interview-style podcast demonstration.
Yeah, and I hope the listeners got some information out of it.
Right on, folks. Keep your microphone out there and start learning from each other and having some good conversations. We'll see you real soon.
Yep. Thanks for watching.
How I win. How I win.